Hello, Garland here, and I am live. Plenty to talk about as always. NATO says they're sending some Soviet era tanks or some such foolishness like that to Ukraine. And we're going to talk about the self inflicted economic wound of the stupidest people on earth, also known as the leaders of the EU and the United States. Let's talk. Hello, friends of mine who have stuck it out. I know I stuck this show up a few minutes ago, and then I went and I was stuffing my face with some salmon sandwiches, believe it or not. But at any rate, before I go to bed on this beautiful Sunday night, let's talk about a couple of things. If you know me, you know that most of the news that I don't even watch the mainstream news anymore because I don't believe in any of it. And not only do I not believe it, it's oftentimes things are so preposterous. Things are so absurd that I wonder how people watch that stuff and still believe it. Ever since weapons of mass destruction, I've said this. I don't believe anything else they say. But here's the latest. Here's the latest. So I'm watching the mainstream news. I mean, I'm rather listening to something on online or something, whatever. And they say, or was it going down the road, listening to the radio, whatever. I don't know how I heard this crap, but here's what they said: the United States has some Soviet era tanks in stored somewhere around uh, Europe, and they're going to send them to Ukraine to be used. And you know me. Here's what happens with most people who consume the news. They hear it. They hear things in the most simple. Okay, well, they're going to send tanks. Okay, well, they'll send them, and the Ukrainians will be able to use the tanks to fight the Russians. Here's what I think. Um, Soviet era tanks, which means they're from, let's see, there was no Soviet Union in 1991. So that means they're from the 1980s, maybe 70s designed. Okay, which means they are analog. There's no, for the most part, you're not going to have any computerized firing mechanisms and all the computerized stuff. Let's start there. And here's my first thoughts. Who's going to run them? The Ukrainian military is trained to use modern warfare tanks that have computerized stuff that connects to satellites, and it has, all these computerized firing mechanisms and all this kinds of stuff. It's computerized. And so what we are to believe is that they're going to pull some 30-year-old tanks out of mothballs. Maybe they were using them to train with, I don't know. And they're going to give them to these people who are trained to use modern tanks. And in the heat of battle, they're going to say, here's a tank. Now, first question, how are they going to get to them? They are out on the battlefield. They can barely move their tanks around, the Ukrainians now. They're pretty much out of fuel because the Russians have blown up all of their fuel depots. B, the Russians have pretty much mostly air superiority. Supremacy. So if they move their tanks around very much, they're going to get destroyed from the air, from drones and helicopters and tank killing mechanisms of all manner. So what I'm to believe is that they're going to take, I don't know, 1,000, 100 tanks, 1,000 tanks, whatever. They're going to somehow get them to the Polish border, and then they're going to cross into Ukraine with 100 tanks, 150, let's say 500 tanks. And somehow the Russian satellites are not going to notice a column of 500 tanks coming across the border, or even 100 or even 50 coming across the border from Poland and blow them to hell immediately. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but the Russians have the same kind of technologically advanced satellites and drones and all of the things that we have. And if you start moving large amounts of hardware around, they're going to pick it up on satellite, and they're going to target it, and they're going to blow it to hell. So here's what I thought to myself. I thought, self, just another lie. Why? It's part of what's going on is information warfare. This is information warfare. And then, is it information warfare against the Russians? No, because the Russians know if you send a column of tanks, we're going to blow them up. It's information warfare against the people in the West. They want to imply that the Ukrainians are still in the fight and the fight's still going on and the Russians are still struggling to hold up against the mighty Ukrainian army. Well, if you follow this thing and you follow information from all over the world, you realize that's not quite the case. And it's down to one major battle, and that is the Ukrainian army in the Donbass region and we hear numbers of anywhere from 20 to 80,000 soldiers that are completely surrounded and will probably all, unless they surrender, that main part of the Ukrainian army will be annihilated. It is a very unfortunate and terrible thing that's going to happen, but I suspect that's what's going to happen if they don't surrender. But according to what we're hearing in the mainstream media, they're getting an army that's completely surrounded. They're going to get them the tanks. How? Are you going to fly them in? You can't do that. They'll get shot down. And what would you fly them in with? They don't have any place to land. You can't bring in anything. How are you going to bring in tanks? And if they're Soviet era tanks, how are the Ukrainians going to know how to operate them? And let me add this. If they're Soviet era tanks, isn't it possible that the weaponry, that the caliber of the rounds is different? I mean, don't they have to have particular armor? I mean, particular sized rounds and things of that nature. But above all, you would have to take some time to train the Ukrainian soldiers to use them. You can't just say, hey, here's some new tanks. No, they're totally different than the ones you've been using, but use these anyway. It's mindless. And that's why I'm so sick of watching the mainstream media. That's why I can't do it, because they constantly put together this stuff that makes no sense. And yeah, there we go. The Smith-Mundt Reformation Act of 2012 being here, I would say that. Thank you, Barack Obama. That's right, because they can use propaganda, change the law so that the intelligence agencies can now use propaganda on its own people, and God knows they do it. Okay, so I'm sure you've seen the latest where they've said that the Russians rounded up 400, 500 civilians and just shot them for some reason. Look, I don't know that it did happen. I don't know that it didn't happen. So I can't tell you what happened. Here's what I can say. My particular perspective on it is I don't think it makes sense. What would be the value of the Russians? Now, cui bono, who benefits? How would it value the Russians to round up 400 people and just machine gun them? Just, okay, we rounded up a bunch of people and just shot them all. Okay, how would it benefit the Russians to do that? Now, let me say the other side. If it was a false flag by the U.S. and its allies, how would it benefit? Who does this benefit? Well, what do you know? In the information war, it greatly benefits the U.S. and its NATO vassals. So in the end, we're supposed to believe that the Russians did like the one thing that they could do to greatly benefit the West. They did it. Well, no, why didn't you just call it, say they used chemical weapons, they used biological weapons, and they used, or something like that. That's the next thing. I mean, you might as well have just, why not throw it all together? If you're going to say, yes, the one thing they could do to greatly benefit NATO would be to slaughter 400 civilians. So what do you know? The Russians woke up one day and said, why don't we do something that'll be of great benefit for public relations perspective from NATO? I don't know. Color me skeptical, but I am quite skeptical about that claim. So we shall see where that one goes. I don't know if you know this, but something's gone down in Pakistan. Apparently, the United States made an attempt to regime change. Apparently, they wrote a letter that's come out now from a guy, I think his last name is Lu, L-U. I think he's a State Department guy. And he basically said to the Pakistani government, relationship can't improve, between the U.S. and the Pakistani government unless you have an election and this guy Imran Khan, your head leader is gone. Well, what do you know? A couple weeks ago, the U.S. was talking about how important it is that we remain neutral and we don't interfere in the sovereignty and democracy of other nations, and that was a lie. And they tried their usual, which is regime changing a country of 220 million people. How stupid is that? All right, I'm not going to go long on this. Let me see. What do we got here? This is terrifying anyway. It shows what happens when the Russians pull back from anywhere in Ukraine. The SBU goes and slaughters people, and everyone on Twitter believes them. Of course, look, we're at a point now where all they've got to say is the Russians did X. And there is a element out here that's just like this. They're sitting and they're watching and they're saying to the US State Department and the US media, give us some more red meat. We hate Russia. Tell us what they did next. They slaughtered civilians. Yeah, oh, they got to be stopped. They slaughtered civilians. What else? They're eating people. I knew them some bitches was going to eat people. We got them now. They're eating people. What else did they do? They're mean to gay people. Oh, of course. Who didn't see that coming? So there is an element out here that's just waiting with bated breath for any allegations that are made against the Russians. And of course, look, we went through this for 4 years. As you know, I hate both parties, don't like Biden, don't like Trump. But for 4 years, the only thing that the intelligence community had to say for Democrats was Donald Trump and something Putin. And the whole Democratic Party would jump. I knew it. It didn't matter if it was debunked the next day, if it was debunked the next second. If Rachel Maddow made an allegation about Trump and Putin, yes, Trump and Putin are working together to turn off your gas and electricity so you'll freeze to death. They would say, I know it. And if she came back 2 minutes later and said, oh, by the way, the business about Trump and Putin, that was all lies, it wouldn't matter. They'd print it the next day, and the Democrats would all run around the next day parroting it as though it was the gospel that came down from the Mount of Olives on a slab carved by God. That's the game. They've set it up. I used to DJ, and I loved it. And I know a lot about DJing. And one thing I've learned about a DJ, once a DJ gets the floor, right? You're DJing at a club. Once you get the people up and they're dancing and they're loving it and you're flowing, you can get away with almost anything. I've seen DJs play stuff you wouldn't believe, but they got the floor going. They got the crowd going. They got the rhythm going, and they had the floor, man, and people are just partying, hands in the air, right? And it got to the point they go off and play some weird stuff. The people loved it. They were so happy. That is the frenzy that the mainstream media gets people in. That's the frenzy that the Democratic Party leadership got their followers in over from when Trump was in, to the point where they had the floor, man. They could make any kind of absurd allegation about Trump, any kind of ridiculous, preposterous allegation about Putin with absolutely no substantiation whatsoever. And the usual suspects would go, yeah, we knew it. And the Democratic Party could come right back out tomorrow and say it's lies. And they'd say, oh, so now you're working with Trump and Putin too, huh? It's bigger than we thought. That's the game. And that's where they are now. So now that Russia's in Ukraine, and do not be mistaken, this is not Russia versus Ukraine. This is Russia against the United States. Ukraine is the staging ground, right? It's like when when a team is like they're getting their stadium rebuilt and they play on a neutral campus, on a neutral stadium. So the Arizona, they're getting the Cardinals, and they're getting a new stadium. So they like play in, I don't know, San Diego or something. And they play like Washington in San Diego. That's what it is. That's what it is. The NATO, look, the US is like, oh, hey, we got to make sure. Okay. Why is the U.S. so involved in the negotiations? Why is the U.S. so involved in arming Ukraine? We got to give them money. Wait a minute. We're not at war with Russia, are we? If we're at war with Russia, then we're at war with Russia. There's another country that is at war with Russia. That country is on Russia's border, and the United States, we have to speak for them. The U.S. says we got to speak for them. We have to give them arms. We have to give them money. We have to do everything we can, go around the world to try to go after Russia in every way we can. What like we're working on behalf of Ukraine? No, Ukraine is just a proxy. It's a proxy ground so we can launch our war against Russia using Ukraine. And that's the true evil, because the Ukrainian people are the one getting blown up. They're the one dying. They're the one getting their countries blown to smithereens, because Russia's not willing to allow the United States to use Ukraine as a military base and just load it full of military hardware. They're like, yes, they came out and admitted that they've been training the NATO, that they've been training the Ukrainian army for years. So NATO has been training the Ukrainian army, arming the Ukrainian army, equipping them. But Ukraine's not a part of NATO. So you're arming them, you're giving them their equipment, you're giving them their uniforms, you're giving them money, you're giving them logistical help, but they're not part of NATO. What sense does that make? And then Russia said, well, they really are part of NATO. You're just not calling them part of NATO. So this is where we are. This is what happens when you screw around on the border of Russia, or screw around on the border of China, or if Russia and China was to screw around with Mexico or Cuba on the border of the U.S., the U.S. would do the same thing. And the U.S. knows it. Now let's move to part two, right? Part deux, sanctions. You know, either one of two things. And I'm not saying the two are mutually exclusive. And people are talking about both. Either the US and the West is deliberately wiping out their own economy, or they're the stupidest people in the history of the world. And either could be true. Excuse me, I just ate a lot. I'm burping and yawning, all kinds of stuff. Boy, I'm not much of a host tonight. Either could be true, or some combination of both. But the fact of the matter is, I know for a fact that there is a significant level of incompetence in the leadership of NATO and of the NATO coalition. Biden and his team are just pure evil. Victoria Nuland, pure evil. She was Dick Cheney's assistant. Pure evil. Pure evil. Right? And then you've got, look at Bojo and Liz Truss, incompetence. You know, you've got, doggone it. Sorry about that. Yeah, so you've got some really stupid people here. So that's one issue, and that is the level of incompetence. The other is that the neocons are liars, and they're underhanded, cheating thieves. They're corrupt. So that's why I said it could be some combination of both. But what's happening? So the U.S. in their plan decided that they're going to provoke this war one way or the other. And then, and yes, they did provoke this war in the same way. All I got to ask anybody is this: what would the United States do if Russia overthrew the government of Mexico and started pumping weapons in Mexico and started building bases on the U.S.-Mexico border and biological research labs on the U.S.-Mexican border? What would the U.S. do? The U.S. would go to war, wouldn't it? It would say, no, we're not going to allow Mexico to be turned into a Russian military base against us. Wouldn't we? And that's what we did in Ukraine, and that's what Russia's doing. Simple as that. It's simple. Right? So what happens? So now they're like, okay, great. We have our opportunity to launch all these sanctions against the US, but they're unbelievably incompetent. So they decided they're going to go to economic war. I don't believe the US and NATO at all want to go to military war, kinetic war with Russia for a number of reasons, but that's a whole nother video. But what they do want to do is launch an economic war. World War III, in their opinion, is economic war. And they believed that they were going to get all these other countries to join in with them, and they were all going to take out NATO. And instead it backfired. And the only thing they have is Canada, Australia, Japan, a little bit of South Korea, and Europe. Africa, not down. They're siding with Russia. Middle East, siding with Russia. South America, Caribbean, Central America, siding with Russia. India, siding with Russia. China, siding with Russia. Most of the world is siding with Russia. So that has failed, which means the sanctions are failed. But they ain't completely failed, because what are they doing? The costs and prices of living are starting to go through the roof, and they haven't even started to move compared to what they will. Sadly, there will be some very difficult times in the global South, in Africa, in the developing countries, as they call them. There will be some very, very hard times, and likely some level of starvation, which means there's going to be political instability, and there's going to be some bad times. Additionally, there's going to be political instability in Europe. I would project that the Olaf Scholz government is doomed. I don't see how they make it out of this one, because their decisions are bringing holy economic hell to Germany. They're bringing economic hell to Germany. Bojo bringing economic hell to the British. So I think at minimum, Olaf Scholz government's going to be the first to fall. To me, it'll be the first to fall. But I think Draghi in Italy, Macron may very well probably make it out, only because his election is soon. And if your election is soon, you got a chance. If it gets past a couple months and it gets into the summer and beyond, it ain't going to be pretty, because these sanctions, and it has been made very well clear by Joe Biden and others, we're going to, the EU and the US are going to sanction themselves in the hopes, in the intention that sanctions against themselves will hurt Russia. And Russia really has barely started to play its hand. But here's the problem. Russia has allies, is one of the biggest, one of the largest economies in the world, and that's China. And then they've got India, which is a tremendous economy. And then they, of course, have got all of Africa, South America, on and on and on, Brazil, the BRICS countries. So Iran. So now you've got a number of very powerful countries, very large economies siding with Russia. They're all working together. And here's something that is really starting to come out. What they have forced is reality to the forefront, right? And economic reality is this. There's a monetary system that says we speculate as to the value of fiat currencies, of government money, central monies that are created, and currencies that are created by central banks, and we guess how much it's worth, and we speculate it on the market, and the value goes up and down. That's one way to understand the value of a currency, or the value of a country's, as they call it, gross domestic product. That's why they say that Russia's gross domestic product is smaller than Italy's or something. But then how do they do the things they do? With the size and the money and the power? Why is that? Two things. Number one, their currency, which is the ruble, is one of the most undervalued currencies on earth. So they're actually valued at much, it's worth much more than it's valued at. Number two, and number one, and number two, and that is gross domestic product is a mechanism, is a tool of Wall Street. Let me give you an example of how valueless this is. It means nothing. It's garbage. Let me give you an example. After the 2008 crash, we were told by our government that there's a recovery, but all the recovery, 97% of it goes to the top 1%. Well, is that true? Well, it's not really true, because there wasn't no recovery. Let me explain. The way they evaluate gross domestic product is a fraud. Here's what happened. Millions of people lost their homes. The banks foreclosed on the homes. The banks sold those homes and made a profit, turned them over and made a profit, right? That profit was counted as part of the gross domestic product. So the U.S. could now say the gross domestic product is rising and we're recovering, when the only thing that was happening was the banks were seizing houses and selling them. So the figures used to calculate the gross domestic product of the United States implied that the economy was recovering, but what they were counting was houses that were taken from working class people who lost their homes in a scam run by the banks, and the banks continued to just scam them and grab those homes and resold them. So the gross domestic product was a fraud. So that's why when they say, well, Russia's gross domestic product is smaller than Italy's, because they're not counting. The way they're counted is garbage. If you count purchasing pay parity, then it's a whole nother thing. I'm not getting into all of this economic theory, but the bottom line is, come on. If you look at Russia, if you look at the size, if you look at what they sell, if you look at what they produce, if you look at the size of their military, the size of everything they have, it's absurd to argue that they're smaller than Italy, that their gross domestic product is smaller than Italy. Okay, so let's move forward. This is a world power. How did they become a world power and Italy's not? Think about it. But what we learned from these sanctions, not what we learned, there were a lot of us that already knew. But what was exposed, that's the word. What was exposed is that in reality, there are a lot of countries who, London for one, England for one, as I say London, England, who it's all money. They're just doing money transfers and the values of money and all this old horse crap. And they're claiming that they're making all of this money there, right? And that's the value of their economy. Russia has things. It has energy. It has gas. It has oil. It has coal. It's the biggest country in the world, like 1/8 of the planet's surface or something, or more is of the land surface. They've got, of course, mines, which means they've got nickel and palladium and neon gas, everything that people need, titanium, Russia has. So let's be honest. You got two countries. One of them has dollars, and those dollars can go up or down. You got another country that has hard commodities, wheat, hard commodities. Which one, if you got to invest your money, you invest your money in. Those hard commodities ain't going anywhere. So when the U.S. tried to take Russia out economically with the traditional economic tools and sanctions that it thought would work, what was revealed was people have confidence in Russia's economy, in the ruble, because Russia can back it up with hard commodities. I don't care what sanctions you put on Russia, they still got oil and gas. And what happened? The price of oil and gas is just going up. And Russia did it the easy way. They got lots of oil and lots of gas. So it's like, well, you can't sell your oil. So Russia just called India. Hey, India, you want a deal? Here's what we'll do. I'll sell you oil. You sell me things, and you have the rupee, I have the ruble. We'll trade in each other's currency. Forget the dollar and the SWIFT system. We'll trade in each other's currency. So then I'll sell you things. You'll give me rupees. I'll give you rubles. And then I'll have rupees and you need rubles. But we still need to buy stuff from each other. I'll give you back your rupees. You give me back your rubles. So if you have two companies that do a lot of business, they can trade in each other's currency because they're just going to buy stuff back from the other one in the same currency. I give you rubles, you give me rupees. I now take those rupees because I need to buy stuff from you because you make stuff and buy stuff back from you. That's what's going on with Russia, now China, now Iran. So now all of these countries are saying, you know what? We don't need the dollar. Long as it's a country that we can buy stuff back and forth from, we trade in each other's currency, and then I just buy stuff back with your currency. You buy stuff back with my currency. I hear a non-U.S. citizen friend of mine wants to buy the Russian ruble. How can they do this? I want to buy ruble. I'm thinking, man, I wish I bought rubles a month ago. I know a guy that made a fortune. I'm not going to say a fortune. He won't tell me how much he made, but he made a lot of money. He made a lot of money in Bitcoin, and he's made a lot of money in rubles recently. And I'm like, geez, when this first started and the ruble dropped, I wish I'd bought it. Why? Because during March, the ruble was the best performing currency in the world. Why is that? Why? Because the ruble, the Russian economy, is backed by commodities, by hard things that don't go away. No matter how we sanction Russia, people still need titanium to build airplanes. They still need aluminum, don't they? They still need neon gas. They still need all of the metals and things they need. Okay, everybody wants these chips. Russia has all the metals and the products that's used to make the chips. So you can't do that. Did you know the U.S. actually is buying, while we tell the idiots in the EU to starve themselves and their dumb leaders do it, the U.S. is actually buying more oil from Russia than it did. It bypassed the sanctions. So the U.S. was like, hey, you blockheaded morons, do me a favor, starve your people and freeze to death. Okay? You don't want to get anything from Russia. They're terrible and evil, you lugheads. And then they called Russia. Yeah, we'll double up on oil. We need some more of that more of that sweet crude. Thank you. The Urals crude, the thick kind, especially. Yeah, we make diesel fuel out of that. Thanks a lot. But don't tell the Europeans because they're idiots and we're keeping them at bay. That's basically what it is. And you think about this. You really think about this and you say, the level of stupidity of the leaders of Europe is without equal in history. I mean, historically, when can you come upon a time when a bunch of leaders said, we're willing to put ropes around the necks of our people and hang them for a country that won't do it, that won't do that? That the US can say, sanction Russia so you don't get stuff from them. Are you sanctioning Russia? Well, not the shit that we need. Hell no. What do you think we are? Stupid as you? And I'm like this. If oh yes, the US is saying fertilizer. Yes, thank you. Sage rage, fertilizer too. That's right. The US has exempted fertilizer because Russia's one of the biggest fertilizer. Russia, Belarus is one of the largest fertilizer exporters in the world, right? So the Russia's saying, yeah, as far as fertilizer, but we ain't sanctioning that because we need it. And those idiots, idiots in the EU, the so-called leaders, the Olaf Scholz of the world, are like, yeah, well, we're just going to go along and we'll go right along. Thanks a lot, the U.S. We'll do whatever you tell us. You just look at it and you say, and I just think to myself, this is not going to be nice or kind. So please forgive me if you're from the EU, because it's not nice. It's not kind. And it applies to the U.S. too. When I think back, and it's wrong, this is unpopular take, please forgive me. But I start with a stream of consciousness, and I just got to say the things that I have as a man who tries to practice the philosophy of Zen, have studied the philosophy of Zen for many, many years. Zen is very much basically, to sum it up, shit happens just the way it's supposed to happen, right? So here's what I think. The European leaders, and the same goes for us, the Europeans vote for these leaders and they put them in office, right? And their leaders starve them and they keep them in office. It's kind of natural selection. Isn't that Darwin's law? Isn't that like natural selection? Hey, I want that guy to lead me. What's he going to do? He's going to starve you to death. Yeah, that's just the guy that I want. Well, then you should starve to death. I hate to say it. Same with the U.S. With us, we put Biden into Trump, Biden, the kind of idiots that we put in office, right? Idiots. We've got this gigantic economy, all these natural resources, all of this stuff we have. And what do we put? A bunch of thugs and gangsters that go around the world ordering people what to do, that spend all of our money. They won't even give us health care. At least the people in the EU got health care. I don't know what health care you're going to get for starvation, but they'll have it. They'll give them some advice. Hey, if you ever get some food, eat it. That's what they'll get. But us, we pick a bunch of morons and we get led down the primrose path. So you know what? To some extent, I've said this, a nation of sheep begets a government of wolves. If we're choosing if we think that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are the best option, we'll get what we got coming. And if some of us starve, look, think about this. Let's go back to the old days. Way back to prehistoric days when, we find some rocks in a little fire pit where a small group of humans lived together in tiny clans. They lived together and they were tribes or whatever the case. You go out to the Amazon and there's a tribes of people, tribes that haven't seen humans before, stuff like that, right? They do things a certain way. And if they screw up, they die. If they take some poisonous berries and make soup and the whole tribe eats it, they all die. So in reality, they are in touch with nature. They can't afford to make these kind of mistakes that we make because the whole tribe dies if they do. So they were much more cautious. They're much slower to step. Oh, what's that there? I don't know. It could be quicksand. Let's poke it with a stick first, and then we'll try to walk. Why? Because you make a mistake, the whole tribe walks in a quicksand, nope, you're all gone. So they can't afford the big mistakes. We think we're so smart. We're in the same boat. So when we elect Donald Trump, we elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, whatever the case, the bottom line is we're stepping in quicksand. And when you step in quicksand, there's a very natural thing that's going to happen. Bloop, bloop. And over in the EU, you're voting in Bojo and these idiots. Now, you know what's going to happen? the natural consequence of voting in morons. They're going to cut off your food supply. They're going to wipe out the euro. They're on this a Moby Dick quest to go after their white whale, which is Russia. And you know what's going to happen? Old Cap Mayhab's going to catch the white whale. And I don't know if you ever read Moby Dick, but I know how that works out. And you're probably going to find out. As am I. I'm in the US. Here's the difference though. That what I got to say. The United States can make it better. You've heard me say this a million times. The United States can produce its own energy. The United States can grow its own food. The United States has a military that can at least protect it and is far, far away from everybody. The United States can make it better. Russia can do all of those things, can produce its own food, can produce its own energy. They can make the Russia, India, China bloc can make it because they have industry, they have food, they have all they need, they can make it. Europe, they have run out of food and they're going to run out of energy and they ain't going to be able to afford it. And they are screwed, blued, and tattooed. And the reality is, from a Zen perspective, oh, the euro was a big mistake. It really was. It was about greed and neoliberalism. But now it's there. And now the people of Europe, if I were to make a suggestion to the people of Europe, it would be you need to replace the people who are running your countries with people who actually give a crap about you. Bad news, the people you're running your country really ain't into you. You know, they're like going on TV now saying, yes, turn your thermostat down and grab another blanket so you can make Putin suffer. And you ain't throwing those people out of office. When somebody says to me, yes, make Putin suffer, and I'm like, well, the last I heard, Putin has an 83% approval rating. The ruble was the best performing currency in the world last month. The shelves in Russia are full. And the price of gas, the price of metals, and the price of oil have gone through the roof. Wait a minute. Russia sells metals, gas, and oil. I don't think they're going to go broke. I think they're going to be all right. The sanctions have driven up the value and the price of the things that Russia sells. I got a funny feeling Russia's going to pull through pretty damn well. And they got advertisements in Germany. Turn up your thermostat. Turn down your thermostat. Get an extra blanket. What next? Miss a meal. You can show Putin. And you'll drop 3 inches off of your waistline through starvation. All I can say is this: it's kind of natural selection. You pick people continuously that are going to starve you. Natural selection says you're going to starve. If you don't figure this out at some point and say, those people got to go, we need a new government, and we're only voting for people who won't sanction the hell out of us. It's like, let's drink poison so we can kill this guy. And you look and he's like, hey, he's healthy, but my stomach hurts. So Europe, if you want to keep doing that, I think we know how this ends with less Europeans. God knows you people are going to suffer. I mean, don't you think at some point that the average schmuck on the street in Europe is going to wake up one day and like go up to their parliament and knock on the door? Hey guys, I was thinking, and I got a lot of time to think because I'm out of work and I don't have any food. I was wondering, how did we get here? Is it possible that we could have done something to prevent starvation and running out of fuel and our economy in free fall? Is there possibly what did the Russians want anyway? Well, they wanted us to say Ukraine will never be a part of NATO. Will Ukraine ever be a part of NATO? Well, of course not. But we couldn't tell the Russians that. And they wanted us to stop pumping weapons into Ukraine. Really, wasn't it expensive to pump weapons into Ukraine? You better believe it. It cost us a fortune. And the Russians wanted us to stop doing something that was costing us a fortune. Sure. Why couldn't we do that? Are you kidding me? That's exactly what the Russians wanted. So we couldn't do that. and they wanted to make Ukraine a neutral country. We couldn't have that. Why? Because how are we going to attack Russia? I mean, we're never going to attack Russia. We just wanted Ukraine to be a safe place. Oh, really? Okay, well, how safe is it? Oh, the Russians blew it to smithereens. So you wanted to make Ukraine safe, and it got blown to smithereens. You wanted to make us better off, and we're starving, and our economy is collapsing, and we're freezing to death. And you've wiped out the Western economies, and there's an entire new economic order that is arising in which countries do a lot of business in their own personal currencies. How? And the EU, the Europeans are going to have to ask their leaders, how do we win? Do you think, perhaps in hindsight, that this was an error? I think we know the answer to that. So, unfortunately for the Europeans, I saw this thing the other day. I saw the day before yesterday. I saw an advertisement. I'm not an advertisement. It was a news spot, and they were talking about what's going on in Germany. Sunflower oil was like $10 a gallon. It's now $55 a gallon. It's up 550%. And I suspect it ain't going to be the last thing that's up 550%. So tell me, Germany, how do you feed your family with that kind of inflation? How do you continue these big corporations that you have? I know, like one company, BASF, they told the German government, if you guys stop getting gas from the Russians, we'll have to shut down and lay off 40,000 people. One country said we'll lay off 40,000. In other words, I mean, there's no even discussion that if they shut off gas from the Russians, then it's it for Europe's economy. Germany's economy is tanked. It's done. It's over. It's finished. Shut it down. The last person to go home, turn the lights out. Well, you won't have to turn the lights out because they won't have electricity anyway. And you know what? Here's what that means. If you really think about it, let's be honest with it. Let's be honest about this thing. The German economy right now is operating by the grace of Vladimir Putin. Tell me I'm lying. By the grace of Vladimir Putin. They have taken $300 million from the Russians. If the Russian leader was to say, here's what we're going to do. You got till Wednesday. If you haven't returned our money by Wednesday, we're shutting off your gas. The Russian industry would string Olaf Scholz up by the short and curlies. Because as soon as it shut up, and would they be wrong? What are they going to say? Well, you broke the contract. Well, isn't it a contract? When I put my money in a bank, don't I have a contract with the bank that I can go to the bank and demand my money and they have to return it to me? So if the Russians say, okay, we broke the contract, yeah, good idea. Let me tell you, give me my money. We got a contract with you that says you got 300 million of ours. Give us our money. You keep contracts, we'll keep the contract. You don't keep the contract, we don't keep the contract. By the grace of Vladimir Putin right now. I mean, there's no other way to put it. The economy, the German and most of a good part of the Northern European economy works because Vladimir Putin is in a good mood today. If he wakes up tomorrow in a bad mood, you bastards, I'll fix you. Click. And what are they going to do? They're going to give his damn money back. Because what are the people of Germany going to do? Yeah, we're willing to put on an extra blanket. We don't want to, but we're out of blankets and it's dark and we don't have any candles. You go back to the Stone Ages. They don't have to drop a bomb. They don't have to bomb you back to the Stone Ages. Click, turn off the gas. I don't think it's wise to start an economic war with another country that can shut your gas off anytime they want. I suspect, I have heard rumor, 50% of the agricultural products in Europe that go to the EU come from the US, come from Russia and Belarus. Now add Ukraine, because Russia's going to be in charge of Ukraine's, really, they're going to have power over Ukraine's wheat and barley and all that stuff. So the reality is, what's going to happen when Russia has 50, 60% of the agricultural products is in charge of it that goes to the EU. And Russia says, can just say to the EU, you guys, I don't like the way you kept our money. We're shutting you down. There is rumor. I've heard the rumor. Dmitry Medvedev, whatever it is, Medvedev, has said that Russia is considering not selling agriculture products of any kind, including fertilizer, to quote unfriendly countries. Well, they got to list unfriendly countries, and we're also included. The U.S. is going to be screwed if Russia stops delivering fertilizer. What are we going to do? We're going to have a food crisis, and the food crisis for Europe is unthinkable. Unthinkable. So, what's going to happen? Somehow, at some point, I think they're going to keep pushing Russia, and Russia's going to get pissed, and boom. At some point, they're going to push Russia too far. There's this thing now, I told you they're saying Russia machine gunned 400 people or something. Who benefits from that? Does Russia benefit from that? No. Does the U.S. empire and its vassals benefit from that? Tremendously. So I'm to believe that Russia woke up and said, what can we do that'll really help the U.S. and really hurt us worldwide? I know. Oh, God. Oh, this is brilliant. Let's just line up 400 civilians and slaughter them. That way, and then we'll leave, right? And we'll just leave the bodies laying sprawled in the street so people can get nice pictures of them laying around and all that stuff. We'll leave. We'll set this thing up nicely where there's bodies everywhere. Then we'll roll on, creep on out, and we'll call them in. Hey, guys, it's set up nicely. Come on and get these pictures so you can pull us up for war crimes. You got to be real naive to believe that one. And I ain't naive. Oh, okay. James J says Medvedev. Oh, that's it. Medvedev. There you go. Dmitry Medvedev. Don't buy physical gold, but the gold mining companies, Newmont and Barrick, are on a tear. Yeah, there's just so many ways. In the war with Napoleon, British sanctions against ships that had docked in French ports were instituted. The ships could not stop at British ports. This was found not to be good for British business. It did not take long for the British to backtrack on these sanctions. Guess people were smarter than these days. Oh, they're beyond stupid, Peter. Beyond stupid. But you know what? Again, as I said, I study Zen. So what happens is, there's natural consequences for things. You can decide the way you want things to work out. There are natural consequences, and both the British and the U.S. are going to face the natural consequences. Although I don't know that Biden makes it. I don't know that Biden makes it to November, to be quite frank. He is such a liability now for the U.S. He's such an embarrassment and a liability for the U.S. that, he can't adequately represent the U.S. He's done. He's lost. He's got some level of cognitive decline that is so blatantly obvious. He's fallen off bad. I don't know how they can keep propping him up. And so I tend to think that they're going to use this Hunter Biden thing to, come to him and say, dude, you're out of office. The problem they have is Kamala Harris, who is the only person in this country that would be more embarrassing as a president than Biden is Kamala Harris, because listen to her. She can't put together a decent sentence. She just babbles. It is truly embarrassing. It's like, you ever hear somebody talk and you're embarrassed for them and you kind of hide your face when they're talking. You're like, ooh, you kind of hide your face like, ow, that's making my ears bleed. Kamala Harris, I don't like to say people are stupid. So I'll just say she has challenges. She has rhetorical challenges, shall we say. She has trouble articulating her thoughts, I hope, because if she is actually articulating her thoughts, there's a hamster wheel in there, and the hamster ain't running real fast. So she's an embarrassment. So what do I think? I would have to guess that they try to drag somebody else in, and of course, the worst possible person they could get would be Mayor Pete. So that would be my guess. Remember, these people are morons and idiots. So you have to guess that they'll do the stupidest thing imaginable. The stupidest thing imaginable would be to bring in Mayor Pete. So, if you think that they're not stupid, look at these sanctions. If you think that they won't do the stupidest thing imaginable, just look at these sanctions. I wonder where Americans and Europeans are going to be this summer and going into the fall when they wake up and start to realize the United States and the Europeans sanctioned their own people. And the people that we were supposed to be trying to hurt live in a country that is loaded to the gills with gold and oil and all these other things that everybody wants. And they grow their own food and make their own stuff. And we've sanctioned the hell out of Russia, but their stores are still full of stuff and they ain't broke. And I suspect that our inflation is going to rise significantly past theirs. I suspect that there will be political unrest beyond belief worldwide, and Europe is going to take it on the chin. So, at any rate, thanks a lot. Let me see. Dems must replace Brandon Pine in November impeachment. We're getting a new House leader. Yeah, there's no question he's going to get impeached. And there's so many things going on now. There's Durham, which I don't trust him, but I don't trust Durham. But let's face it, a mole could do that investigation and stumble into 50 crimes. On you know what I mean? Come on. You could bring someone who knows nothing about investigations, could look into the Clinton people and look into what happened in the in Russiagate and charge 50 people with crimes. So Durham, if he doesn't charge everybody involved, he's a criminal. So I don't trust him. He'll look. All he's done was tinkered around the edges. When he goes for one of the big fish, I'll believe it. Otherwise, I'll figure he's just working with the deep state, and he's going to let off all the big fish, and he'll find a few people here, just like what's his name did, just like the rest of them did. Mueller. They'll charge a couple people here and there with process crimes. You lied to the FBI, and you're going to get a fine. Now you can walk. So I'll believe that Durham's going to do something when I see it and not until. But that you've got that going on. And you've got Hunter Biden going on. So there's a lot of stuff going on that they could use to slam Biden or just threaten him and just say, look, dude, you're going to jail and your son's going to jail. Or particularly your son, because Biden wouldn't know he was in jail right now. They're wandering him around. What good value would it be to put Biden in jail? He wouldn't know where he was. He'd think he was in a rose garden. Take the guy out, give him some ice cream, and let him sit out in the sun in the afternoon and get a nice day. And I mean, I don't. People like Biden, it's not nice to punish people like that. There was a time when he knew what was going on, and he should face the music for his war crimes and other things. At this point, there's no point. And just give the guy some ice cream and take him out in the yard in the afternoon and walk him around a little bit or something. I mean, for his remaining days, I'm not a heartless, cold person that I'm going to punish a guy who doesn't even really know what he's getting punished for. No, he's babbling at this point and slobbering on himself, and he barely has control of his own body, bowel movements. And I'm past that with Biden. But I'm just saying, let's do this before I leave. Like, subscribe. If you're watching this on Facebook, believe it or not, they let me back on Facebook. I guess that ain't gonna last long after this video, huh? But Facebook and Twitter, if you're watching me on there, do me a favor, go to my YouTube show and like and subscribe to my YouTube. Additionally, I have a Patreon page, patreon.com/Garland Nixon. I'm working to get $100,000, and every little bit helps. If it's $1, if it's $5, if it's $20 a month, please go to my Patreon page, because I'm actually building a network and I know how to do it. And I'm going to get that money together. I got some plans for some fundraisers going on this summer. So, stay with me. And we're going to build our own network. We're going to build our own alternative media not an outlet, a network where we have a number of shows, where we have our webpage, where we don't have to go through YouTube and nobody can cut us off, and we don't have self-censored. That's my plan. And I'm going to take the money and I'm going to do that. Go to patreon.com/Garland Nixon to donate today. Wow, 100 people. I want to thank everybody. This is awesome. Please add your YouTube to your Twitter info. Didn't know you had one. Oh, yes. Oh, crap. I am not real bright, am I? But at any rate, yeah, I've moving a little slow here. Yes. Oh, that's right. I got to put it on my Twitter page. I know what you're saying now. Yes, I got to put it on my Twitter page. But thanks a lot, everybody, and share, like, subscribe, and have a wonderful Sunday evening. I got to get going tomorrow. Check this out. Tomorrow I have to I got two shows. Of course, I got my show in DC and I got my show in Los Angeles at, KPFK. I got to do that at 5 p.m. Um, Eastern time, which is 2. So if you're out in LA and you listen to KPFK or Southern Cal and you listen to KPFK, check me out there. I'll do my show. That's from 2 to 3 p.m. And that is Pacific time. And then I'm going to do my guy McDuff. I'm doing his show tomorrow. Believe it or not, I got an email from CNN that asked, did I want to come on? They want to interview me about Sputnik. And I said to CNN, I sent an email, I'll do it if it's live, but I'm not going to do a taped interview because I know the game. I was on Fox for many, about 10 years. I was on Fox, right? Close to it. And I know the TV game. And if I go on, if they tape me, they'll just like tape an hour. And then when it comes time to, when you actually see the segment, they'll like take one word where I said yes. They'll say, is your name Garland Nixon? Yes. And they'll just hold that piece of tape. And they'll say, so Garland Nixon, you're a liar, a fraud, a traitor, a murderer, a pedophile, and just an all around evil man. And they'll show the tape and I'll go, yes. They're like, there it is. He's admitted it. He's happy. So I told him I will do live. I'll go and see it in live, but I will not tape something and allow them to just, to edit it up and chop me to death. That ain't happening because, if it's live, I can stand up for myself very, very well. So I got a funny feeling they ain't gonna let me go on live, but I would love to go on if I did. So thanks a lot. Farrah from Sputnik. Got the same call from CNN. Yeah, exactly. It's a trap. It is a trap. They're calling us all. Same thing, the game. So if I hear from them, only live. And that's the way I am right now anyway. I'm only doing live. And when I was on Fox for all of those years, the funny thing about it is I had some insiders who were working on MSNBC trying to get me on. This was before I had done Sputnik or RT or Press TV, any of the foreign stuff, right? Before I'd done any of that, I had some people and they were like sending them videos. And I was on Fox all the time. I was on all the shows, right? I was on a regular show every hour. Every week I went to New York and did a 1-hour show with it was called Money Rocks, and then it changed the name to Follow the Money with Eric Bolling. And I did that an hour every week, right, in New York. And then when that show ended, then in DC, I started doing all the shows in DC. Bill O'Reilly, Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham. I was a regular on there. I did all those shows on the weekends. It was called Fox News Headquarters or something like that. News Headquarters, whatever it is. I was on there all the time. I know the deal on mainstream news, and I really enjoyed it. And you believe it or not, Cavuto, all of those shows, believe it or not, I was good with that because they allowed me to be myself. They asked me a question and they actually allowed me to answer, with the exception of Bill O'Reilly. He talks over you all the time. But the bottom line was, I remember I went on with Candace Owens, and Candace Owens, funny thing, when I went on with her and I was supposed to be going back and forth, and the subject was, we were on, I think it was Laura Ingram's show, if I remember. It was Laura Ingram's show. And they said, the question was, is the Democratic Party too much connected to the intelligence community? And they're like, oh, and Karen said, yes, they are, blah, blah, blah. And they got to me. They're like, what do you think? And I'm like, you're absolutely right. 100%. And at the time, I was a Democrat, right? I was a Democrat at that time. And I'm like, but I had my principles even then. God knows I was an idiot, I guess, but I had my principles. But I said, look, I don't think either party should be so connected to the intelligence community. I don't think it's good for democracy. And I had that talk. That was before they even, if I don't remember, maybe after they rooked Bernie. Don't remember what year it was. And Candace Owens says, I like Garland. He's my favorite Democrat. And it's not that I agreed with Candace Owens or in general or ideologically, but if you ask me, should any party be connected to the intelligence community? The answer is always going to say no. See, that's what people like us, me and my friends here, everybody on the chat right now, this is what a lot of people don't understand about us, and you guys are going to get it. Forget the parties. I'm not a member of a party. Some of you may be members of parties. Some of you may not. But we have principled stances on things. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. We have principled. Some of us are conservatives. Some of us are libertarians. Some of us are socialists, communists, non-affiliated, not everything. I have people and friends that everything. But what I can tell you about all of the people that kind of I associate with, and there's associated with my channel, they have principles. Here's the term I use: deal killer. Everybody should have deal killers. Some guy meets a girl in a bar. Man, she's nice. I like her. Hey, would you like to go out? She says, sure. Tell me a little bit about yourself. He says, well, I don't know, fill in the blank. I'm a plumber and, I do this and blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's nice. Great. You're a plumber. What about you? And she says, well, I just got out of prison for murdering 4 people. And I'm going to go back into the drug trade. And you're just deal killers. Those are deal killers. What do? I'm a hatchet murderer. Deal killer. We all have to have deal killers. Now, in my younger days, depending on what you look like, I might be able to look over the hatchet murderer thing. If I was 20, when I was 25, I might be like, you're a hatchet murderer? Yeah. We'll talk. But luckily, at some point, I started thinking with other parts of my body with the prefrontal cortex, and I realized that perhaps this physical attraction thing wasn't the only thing we should be concerned with. Thank God. That's why I'm still here. But my point is, all jokes aside, deal killer's the word. A deal killer. What's wrong with having a deal killer? The parties, I'm going to rant again, but what the hell? We're amongst friends. What happens is this. Hey, I'm a member of the Democratic Party. Okay, do you have anything that here's the thing you might want to be concerned with. The Democratic Party now is training, associated with, and arming Nazis, real, absolute Nazis. I guess I'm okay with that. Garland says there's a deal killer. Nazis, deal killer. That should be a deal killer. But this is the way it's done now. It's done like this. Democrat, Republican. When you realize that your party's doing something that really should be a deal killer, and now you have cognitive dissonance in your mind. You have principles and you're a principled person, and you would have deal killers. However, you now run into a deal killer. And if you acknowledge that this is true, that means you must leave the party because it goes against your principles. So you simply say it ain't true. Hey, you're a member of the Democratic Party. Yeah, you guys are arming Nazis. No, we're not. Same with Republicans right now. A lot of Republicans are all for it too. Yay, let's arm those Nazis. We got to fight the Russians. Well, you're arming Nazis. I don't believe it. It's not true. That's what you do. You just simply say it ain't true. No matter how much evidence there is, you say it ain't true because you don't have to face your principles. Let me tell you a real quick story before I go. I could tell you story after story about Fox News in the green room, all the people that I used to see and all the names, all the people I used to see in there regularly. God, I hate John Bolton. And I used to see General Jack Keane and all of these people that you see on Fox all the time. But one time, I'm in a green room, and there's a woman, beautiful, very beautiful woman. She was a conservative. Of course, she was on Fox, so I have to say. And she was about to go on. And I said, what are you going? You'd be in the green room, people would talk. And I'm like, oh, what are you going on for? And she says, well, the Democrats in New York want to have want to do the driver's license, or they're doing driver's licenses in Spanish. And I don't think they should. And I think the government should stop giving them money. I think we should cut off all their money if they're going to do that. And I'm like, you're a conservative, right? She says, yeah. I'm like, conservatives usually talk about the 10th Amendment. And being a conservative, wouldn't you say that the federal government is not to try to supposed to influence the state, that the state is supposed to be able to make those decisions and the government shouldn't try to influence them? Doesn't that go against your conservative principles? And she goes, I guess you're right. That does go against my principles. I said, yeah, I think so. And she goes, oh, well, good thing I'm not going on against you. And off she goes and goes on and makes the argument the same. So we had that little discussion, and she realized that according to her principles, she would have to argue on behalf. If she was a conservative and she went by the pillars of conservatism in the United States, she would have to argue on behalf of Blue New York and say they should be able to do it because the federal government shouldn't tell them not to. But she realized that, and she said, but I'm taking this position anyway. What does that mean? That she didn't have principles. She had an ideology. There was an ideology that says, I oppose immigrants or undocumented immigrants, whatever it was. But that was contradicted by her supposed belief that the primacy of the 10th Amendment, so that you believe in federalism. The government doesn't tell the state what to do except where it's enumerated in a constitution, right? And when those things hit, she just dropped the principles. That's what you're dealing with these people who are diehard Republicans or diehard Democrats. They don't have principles. They have ideologies, and barely much of that. And they don't even know what the hell their ideologies are. Me, and a lot of my, yeah, there we go. Dusty James says imperialism is the deal killer. That's right. We tend to have something that we stand for. And now they're getting upset because they want to call everybody, well, if you're to the left of the party, you're a misogynist, racist, sexist, phobic. That's it. If you're to the right of the party, what are you? Misogynist, sexist, racist. You're a homophobic. You're a white supremacist. You're all of these terrible things. They just have names that they call you. It doesn't matter anymore. If you don't agree with the mainstream narrative, fill in the blank. You're a what's the other one? Conspiracy theorist. They just got names they call you. They don't even really mean anything anymore. And we're like, well, if you're going to tell me something about Russia or China or Iran or whatever, let's go over the details. We want to nuance this thing. If you're right, explain it to us. If you're wrong, explain it to us. I'm a one who believes in sovereignty. Let me give you an example. When I say sovereignty, I really mean sovereignty. Garland Nixon's now the president of the United States, and they say, are you going to do business with Saudi Arabia? They're doing all kinds of terrible things. I'm going to say, yes, I am. Why? It's a sovereign nation. I may not like what they're doing. I may not approve of what they're doing, but it's a sovereign nation, and we need something that they have, and we need to purchase it. They need something that we have, and they need to purchase it. We'll do a deal with them. I believe in sovereignty. I'm not going to go around the world and tell every country how they should live, how they should treat this group or that group. I may suggest it. If I have an issue, I'll go to the UN Security Council. I'll go to the UN and say, hey, let's try to make this. Let's try to talk to this country. Let's try to work with them to treat this group better, whatever the hell. I don't mind doing that. But when it comes to business, I sanction them. I'm doing business with them. They need to buy widgets. We need to sell widgets. They need to sell widgets. We need to buy widgets. I believe in sovereignty. You don't go around saying this country, Juan Guaido is the president of Venezuela. No, Venezuela is a sovereign country. We'll buy what we need from Venezuela and sell them what they need. I believe it. And I think there's more people waking up to that. To this business about, well, China, they don't treat their people right. They do treat their people right. Well, the last time I looked at legitimate polls, 86 to 93% of the people in China supported their government. That's good enough for me. It ain't none of my business. That their culture may be different. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they got bigger fish to fry. Maybe they're like, we got healthcare coverage and a roof over our head and a job. Being able to say what we want online ain't as important to us. It's their culture. It's not my business. The idea that a country that has 86 to 93% government approval, that somehow we have to make sure a country that Joe Biden with a 30% approval rating, we got to go to a country where they got a 93% approval rating and tell them how to live better. It's none of our business. I believe in sovereignty. We do business with them. They do business with us. If the people are happy, if they ain't happy, that's up to their people, not us. Am I wrong? I don't think I am. Holy crap. It's 10:39. I've been going on for an hour. All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody. Once and for all. I'm out. Patreon.com/Garland Nixon. Do what you can to help a brother out. Help a brother out. And I don't mean that it's going in my pocket. I'm simply trying to get some funds together so we can get a network going and stop being oppressed by the YouTubes and various platforms of the world that are holding a brother down. All right. Thanks a lot. Peace. I'm out.